my Zen teaching. Okay, so let me cover why I don't teach the Eightfold Path during my Zen teachings, because everybody thinks, hey, the Eightfold Path is the way to practice the Buddha's teachings. Yes and no, that's not the only way. So the Buddha taught a total of 37 factors of enlightenment. 37 factors, okay? So in the handout, I have a link. Let me pull out that link. In the handout, I have a link for the Zen class, in the Zen class topics, okay? 37 factors of enlightenment is the complete bulk of teachings of the Buddha's teachings regarding the way to end suffering. Okay, and it's summarized really well in the link in this text that I'm going to share now. Hold on, share screen. So this is the link of the text that I'm sharing right now. Okay, can you see it? Yes. Okay. So this is the optional link. Okay, so you can see here there are 7 groups that makes up the 37 requisites of enlightenment that are described by the Buddha throughout his 45 years of teaching as forming the way to end suffering. So why is there 37 factors of enlightenment, not like 8, like people know in the West, Eightfold Path? Because there are many ways to Rome, okay? And these 37 factors of enlightenment are the 7 ways you can get there, okay? So that's why I don't teach the Four Noble Truths, because there are so many different ways to Rome. There are so many different ways to practice. And so during the Buddha's days, he taught this 37 group, okay? And he taught it to people in front of him. So based on what was happening in front of him, he taught the person in front of him whichever practice that applies to them. So in this 37 factors, it's divided into 4 foundations of mindfulness, which everybody knows. These Sapita Patthana, everybody who practice insight meditation knows. Theravada meditation knows. The 4 types of right effort, the 4 bases of mental power, 5 spiritual faculties, 5 spiritual power, 7 factors of enlightenment, and 8 noble Eightfold Path. So there are 37 factors of enlightenment, okay? And in this 37 factors, you have things mentioned over and over again. For example, right concentration is mentioned how many times? Right effort is mentioned 9 times in this 37 factors. Right mindfulness appears 8 times. Wisdom appears 5 times. Concentration appears 4 times. And faith appears twice. Okay, that is mentioned in this 37 factors. So you can see it's kind of like, I'm going to teach you the way to this place, and I'm going to subdivide it this way. And then you're going to say, oh, okay, there's another way to approach this place. I'm going to subdivide it this way. So the 37 factors are basically 7 ways of practice to approach the truth. Okay, so the Noble Eightfold Path is just one of them. Is one of those 7 ways. Okay, so in the West, everybody keeps thinking, the Noble Eightfold Path, that's the only way to practice. No. Okay, during the Buddha's time, he taught 37 factors, okay, which is like 7 different ways of practice. So you can read this, and if you're curious, you can read the whole book on it, that the Wings of Awakening. It's a very good book covering the 37 factors of enlightenment. when I started studying Buddhism, I had to study all of them, like all of these 37 factors in detail. And so that covers all of the Theravada and earlier teachings, the earliest Buddhist texts, okay? That covers the bulk of the Buddha's 45 years of teaching, okay? And that this points to the fourth noble truth, which is the way to end suffering, okay? Then, okay, so we'll in these 7 ways of entering the truth, of getting to the truth, concentration and mindfulness is mentioned over and over again. So let's examine why. Okay, so when you look at the jhanas, what is the jhanas? Jhanas in the reading that I had assigned is referred to as a practice of meditative absorption. Basically, you got an object you're looking at, okay? An object you're placing your attention on. And your attention is so absorbed on the object that it no longer moves towards another object. So the object that we use in our first meditation is what? The breath and the counting. We have 2 objects, the breath and the counting. Because the mind wanders so much, we use the counting to kind of redirect that energy, okay? But once the mind calms down, you let go of the counting and you can hold your attention on the breath, okay? The energy is no longer so frazzled that you have to redirect it, okay? So you're able to calm down, you're able to hold the attention on the breath without the mind wandering. So at that point, you should be able to enter the first jhana. If you're able to hold your attention on the breath long enough, and you're able to be completely absorbed in it. How do you enter the first jhana? You enter the first jhana by overcoming what I called the 5 hindrances, okay? And the 5 hindrances are things that cause suffering. That's what hindrances are. There are things that causes suffering, okay? So things that you experience in everyday life that causes human suffering. And the first one is desires for sensory experience, desire for pleasure, basically the seeking to get, I call what psychology these days are called dopamine fix. So whether you're playing on your phone, whether you're watching TV, whether you're having a cheesecake, the act of seeking to grasp those things are what is coined as desire for sensory experience, and that is the very first things that are going to prevent you from going into the first jhana. So the other one is ill will or aversion. Now this one is a little bit more subtle. If you are someone who has experienced a lot of trauma in your past, you're going to have tendencies to avoid your feelings, your emotions. You're going to have a tendency to avoid whatever that discomfort you. If you're someone who is also, someone who kind of pleasure seeking, you're gonna avoid discomfort. You're gonna avoid whatever's in front of you. If it's pleasurable, you seek it. If it's uncomfortable, you're gonna avoid it. And the more when avoidance and resistance gets really, really intense, it becomes hatred. Okay, and ill will is a step above hatred. Okay, so ill will is I don't like this. It's a pushing away. It's resistance to what is, not wanting things to be as they are. Okay, so ill will, when it's really, really expressed strongly, it's anger, and when it's expressed even stronger than that, it becomes hatred. Okay, and it all starts with a little bit of aversion. Okay, aversion is avoidance. No, not wanting things to be the way they are. Sloth and torpor. The mind is dull, half aware. It's more kind of mindless. You know, we go about through life having a lot of pre-programming. And when you do your counting, you're going to notice that programming. Okay. And when you observe what you do during regular life, you're going to notice that programming. When you wake up in the morning, you go and get your cup of coffee first. That's a programming, right? you have a routine. That's your programming. When somebody pisses you off, you have a programming to react a certain way. When things don't go your way, you have a programming to react a certain way. So the sloth and torpor is actually a dull mind that allows that programming to run without you being aware of it. So it's not to the point of sleepiness. Although sometimes people do get sleepy during meditation, but sloth and torpor is a little more subtle than that. It's basically mindlessness. Okay, it's mindlessness. So you meditate for a while now. You all know what mindlessness looks like. Okay? Restlessness and worry. Now this one is the one that creates the most suffering. Is restlessness and worry. Okay, you worry about the future. You regret the past. You want things to be different in the past. You want things to be in your control in the future. And restlessness and worry is the #1 cause of suffering. And it can be, sometimes it can come in a state of constant irritation or boredom. Okay, that's also a factor that stops people from entering the jhanas. And the biggest one I find that with most long-time meditators is lack of trust in oneself or lack of trust in the practice. Okay, doubt. This is not a good doubt. This is not the doubt that we're talking about in Zen, which is healthy doubts, right? Leave things on the table and test it. This is a doubt in one's capacity. You know, this is a doubt in other people. This is a general overall doubt of everything, you know, because of a persistent state of insecurity. Okay, you know, there's some people who are unable to trust anyone. Okay, and that doubt and paranoia, I think that this exists in all of us to some extent, as on a spectrum. But the higher the spectrum you go when it comes to doubt, the less likely you're going to get anywhere in your Zen practice. Okay. And if you're not having a breakthrough in your Zen practice, if you're not getting into deep jhanas, you got to really look at these doubts. Unfortunately, there's no way around it. Okay. So in order to get into the first jhanas, these 5 hindrances have to be overcome. I'm not saying they have to be overcome in all aspects of your life. They just have to be overcome while you're on the cushion. Okay, they just have to be overcome while you're on the cushion. So that's not too bad, right? If they're overcome all the time when you're on and off the cushion, basically you're the walking Buddha. Okay, it just have to be overcome while you're on the cushion. So if they're overcome for 5 minutes, you're able to concentrate and hold attention on the breath and can be completely absorbed in it and release from all of this. You're able to apply focus, concentration, hold attention, and then shift the attention over to the body sensation. Find the pleasurable sensation, hold attention on that, and suddenly you got into the first jhana where it's very gleeful. You suddenly got this energetic movement going through your body, you know, as your body starts to shake. You start having this intense joy and happiness starts to permeate your body. And I call it a positive feedback loop because you're holding attention on, you know, a pleasurable sensation. If you have enough concentration before you start to shift attention from the breath to that pleasurable sensation, you're going to be able to magnify this experience, the experience of the pleasurable sensation in your body. And if you can't find a pleasurable sensation in your body, it's fine. Smile. Sometimes when you smile, automatically you're going to experience pleasure, right? So smile, and then you're going to feel some lightness, and shift your attention over to that lightness. Hold it there. If you're able to sustainably hold it there, it's going to depend on the power of your focus and concentration. If you have a lot of concentration power to hold attention intensely on that pleasurable sensation, it will burst into something almost orgasmic. I had the experience once that happened in a retreat. Suddenly, I was sitting in a retreat and there was over 100 people in that retreat, and I just suddenly bursted laughing. I couldn't stop laughing. There was like all these pleasure just runs up from my stomach, right and up the top of my head. And every part of my body, every cell, it was like jumping with joy. I've never took any drugs, but I think that it's probably close to, I don't know, some sort of a high that you get from certain types of drugs, but it's natural. Okay, it's generated naturally by your own mind. So that's the experience of the first jhana. The first jhana is actually, if you enter it totally, to magnify this pleasurable sensation totally, it is very disturbing actually, because the pleasure is too overwhelming, and a part of most of us, we don't allow ourselves to experience that much pleasure, to be honest. So we hold back, and we're like, what's wrong with this? There's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with my body. And I tell people, I said, just let it happen. Okay. We have a tendency to hold back, right? And don't. I just tell people, don't hold back. Just jump in. Just let it happen. Experience joy. Experience the happiness, and experience it fully. Enjoy it fully. The first jhana is meant to be thoroughly enjoyed until you realize that it's unsatisfactory. Okay, and it's unsatisfactory. Why? Because it's overwhelming and it's not calming. Okay. And that's when you decided, hey, it's time to let it go. So then you shift your attention from the joy and the pleasurable sensation, okay, back to the I call it the calmness behind that. Okay, there's a feeling of contentment behind that. So they call it sukha, okay, which is a joy and happiness from release, from letting go. Okay, so when you let go of the 5 hindrances, basically you let go everything already. If you're letting go of the 5 hindrances, so you shift over your attention away from the pleasurable sensory experience over to the joy of letting go, just the experience of release. Okay, that calming release behind the pleasurable sensation. So the pleasurable sensation will die down, and then it becomes a little more distant and quiet. The tranquility increase. By the third jhana, the pleasurable sensation is completely disappear, and all you have is this emotionally neutral contentment. Okay, that experience. It's incredibly calm. So whatever happens outside, whatever happens, outside that you can hear, it's very calm. How I test people to see whether they're in this jhanas or not is, remember the last time we had our advanced class, we were sitting in my house. I took a big ruler out, and in the middle of our meditation, I just smack it on the floor, and I see who's jumping. Now, whoever's jumping, they're not in the third jhana. Does that make sense? Okay, so you don't react to the sensory experience outside the same way. Okay, there's a calmness, there's a steadiness and a calmness that is experienced in the third jhana. Okay, by the fourth jhana, this state of calmness has deepened into almost like, when you're diving underneath the water, right? You're diving in the deep end of the pool. The deeper you dive, the more calm it is underneath the water. You hear less of what's going on in the surface. And so the fourth jhana is when people are really talking about equanimity, where you have this steadiness. Because when in the third jhana, the pleasurable contentment goes away and it becomes more neutral. In the fourth jhana, there's no distractibility anymore. In the third jhana, you still probably have a floating thought here and there, kind of distance away, but in the fourth jhana there's no arising of thought whatsoever. So the thought is completely died down. You still experience, I call it contentment, okay? And the contentment is not a feeling. The contentment is not so much a feeling, it's very subtle, okay? It's not sensory, because the sensory experience don't hit you the same way anymore, and it's not a feeling. Even though you can still experience sensory, and you can still experience, sound from outside, you can experience all the sensory experience, it's kind of subdued, okay? There's no reaction to it, it's very subdued. One time I actually tested this out. I was kind of curious how this works outside of kind of sitting meditation. So I tried to enter the fourth jhana while watching a horror movie. This is experiential, right? So I'm very much into the testing. So I entered the jhana. I used to hate horror movies, by the way. Kid who like watching horror movies, because I get really scared of it at night. So I turned on a horror movie. I think it was in 2007 or 2006. I turned on a horror movie, and while I was not in the jhana, and I watch how my bodily response is going on, right? So every time there is a loud sound or the the slasher or the killer jumps in and kills someone, my body would have a kind of really, trigger response, right? As soon as I enter the fourth jhana, it was like, oh yeah, you just got killed, no problem. Patricia's shaking her head.
I gotta say, you're funny, Lotus.
So I sat there in this incredible state of, like clarity and calmness, right? So I'm still in subject and object, appreciation. So I'm watching the horror movie. It was about some cave divers getting killed in a cave by some monster. Anyway, it was a very scary movie. Just like 5 minutes ago, I was getting a really strong physiological response out of the horror movie. As soon as I get into the fourth jhana, whatever, I watched the whole movie without actually responding at all physiologically, which is quite interesting. Okay. Okay. So my observation when you go into the fourth jhana is emotions, okay? Sensory experience are reduced. There's no thoughts there. There's a steadiness and there's calmness there. You don't respond to sensory experience the same way. You still perceive duality, okay? So there's a subtlety in that when you apply the observation into whatever's going on in the jhanas, and you apply the observation into the jhana factors, you're gonna see that the mind is pretty sharp. It's clear, it's pretty calm, it's pretty steady. And I mean the mind as not as the thinking mind, the awareness observation mind. But then there's duality. You've got the subject who is observing the object, okay? The subject is, well, the observer, and the object is whatever arises, the sensory experience, the breath, the stillness. You can use the stillness, the calmness as an object, okay, to observe at that time, because The Buddha's teaching is that you observe the whole body in the process of the breathing, not just, this little spot on your nose. Okay, that's not the Buddha's teaching. That's the commentary. So that's the sensory experience. So in the fourth jhana, there's still subject-object awareness. Okay, so when you look at that, you go, there's still subject-object awareness. Well, how do you go further than that? Well, when you get to the base of infinite space, this gets a little more interesting. How many of you here gone camping, gone hiking into the mountains, stand at the top of the mountains, look down, Yeah, ever had that experience? Where you lay down on the grass, look up the sky? Ever had that experience? Yeah, okay. And when you have that experience as a kid, you remember that it's very calming, it's very nice. Yes, it's very relaxing. It's just relaxing, and woof, for a moment, you disappear. And there's only this huge expansiveness of space. Okay? That is the practice of the fifth jhana. Going from the jump in the third jhana, the fourth jhana to the fifth jhana is probably the hardest. Okay? The first jump from kind of establishing concentration, calming down your mind down to overcome the 5 hindrances to get into the first jhana is the first biggest jump. From the first jhana to the fourth jhana, not too hard. From the fourth jhana to the fifth jhana is the most challenging. If you grow up in the city all your life, this is probably going to be the most challenging. Okay, because you're going to perceive, ending of, kind of corners in space, kind of like restricted. But if you grow up on a farm, or you grow up, kind of like me, who spends a lot of time in nature, it's a little bit easier to practice. Why? Because you're going to go beyond your perception of the limited space in your room to expanding your awareness. So from the first jhana to the fourth jhana, your awareness is restricted to your body. Now, a lot of school of meditation, especially insight meditation, and from Jack Kornfield and that school, whatever, they teach that you have to observe like certain parts of your body. They call it body scanning. Okay, so they're learning from the Burmese. They scan certain parts of the body and they go through the whole body by scanning it piece by piece. No. That's not what the Buddha taught. The Buddha taught that you become aware of your whole body, but your awareness is still very restricted. Your awareness, you're only observing a very small space. Okay, when you go into a base of infinite awareness, you are expanding that space of awareness into infinity. So how do you do that? You start by noticing your body, and then you start by noticing the room you're sitting in, not the walls of the room, the space in the room. Okay. And when I said noticing, I'm not saying imagining. I'm saying noticing, becoming aware of the space. That gets a little bit subtle. And then you start expanding beyond your room into your whole house. And then you start expanding beyond your whole house into the street outside. And you start expanding beyond the street outside down to your own whole neighborhood. And you start expanding past your neighborhood into the whole city. And you start expanding past your city into the country. And then you start expanding, you keep pushing your awareness bigger to the country, to, the globe, to infinity. Okay. I'm not asking you to imagine. This is very important. You're not having a mental visualization of what's going on. You are noticing. That is the biggest difference. Okay. Just as you are noticing the body, you're noticing the space. If you start visualizing, that is wrong. Okay, remember when you have that hiking trip, you get on top of the mountain, you know, in Ontario, I used to go camping at Algonquin Park a lot, and they have these wonderful hikes. And you know, when you get on top of the hill and you look down, and you just feel like this awesomeness, you know, that this wonderful space that opens up. And for a moment, you know, yourself just disappears. And people can have this experience when they go in nature, when they go camping, when they go hiking in the mountains, often, very often. Matter of fact, this is the very experience that gets people addicted to hiking in the Mount Everest. One of my ex-boss in Saskatchewan, he actually climbed Mount Everest before. And I asked him why he climbed. He described this experience to me. Okay, that he said while he was climbing, facing life and death, what was really most important was the next step that he's taking. He can't think about anything else. Right? And so it becomes intense concentration, plus you're in thin air space, plus you're on top of the mountain. The view is fantastic. Okay, there's immense openness and space there. So that's what attracts a lot of the mountain climbers and hikers, because of this experience. Now, beautiful. You don't have to risk your life to do this. You can do it in the comfort of your own home. I'll just teach you how to do it, okay? So you don't have to climb Mount Everest and die. Because my ex-boss said there's quite a number of people who died on the way there when he was doing it. So, you know, like I said, nobody dies on the cushion. You can experience the same experience as climbing Mount Everest on the cushion. So the base of infinite space. Okay, so at this point, no thought comes. You're going to start losing awareness of the body. The expansiveness opens up. There's the stillness, okay, there. But there's some feelings, and I don't really, it's not really sensory feelings, but it's more of a gladness. It's more of an enjoyment of the expansiveness. It's like, oh my God, it's a sense of wonderful freedom. It's just like, oh my God, it feels so free. And this infinite space is a space where people feel just awe. This is where people feel awe with nature, okay? Except you can generate this in your own mind on the cushion, okay? And so if you have any thoughts in this space, then you're not really wholly in this space. If you have sensation in this space, then you're not wholly in this space, but you still have feelings, the feeling of gladness, okay? The feeling of freedom being in this space. But perception and consciousness still remains. So there's a temporary loss of body awareness in this space. So if you were feeling pain in your body, you go into the space, your pain is going to be reduced at least 80%. Okay. So I went to the dentist one time, and I don't think he applied enough painkillers. Actually, I told him not to give me the needle, so he just gave me Novocaine. So I went to the space. So the pain, it got reduced. It got cut down 80%. So there's very, very little body awareness. Okay. So when you're in this space, you will observe that, oh, okay, it's great, it's nice. There's a sense of freedom. There's a sense of openness. There's a sense of, oh, great. Just complete joy from the sense of freedom. And this joy is not like the first joy of the first jhana. This joy is like a very subtle joy. But from this space, you realize, hey, wait a minute. In order for infinite space to be perceived, the perceiver must be there in order to perceive the object of infinite space. right? So you're still in subject-object duality. We're not looking at here, right? So the base of infinite consciousness is the next one. So instead of shining the light out into infinite space, before you're shining the light out, the flashlight, to a small reduced area, from the first to the fourth jhana, small reduced area, right? So it's like a flashlight it's shining a small reduced area. Suddenly, you've got this big bulb that opens up that shines everywhere. Okay, at the fifth jhana, where where the light becomes, the awareness becomes diffused. It opens up. It's not a concentration, attention that's placed on a little thing. It's attention that placed on infinity, on all the space around you. Okay. But then you realize, wait a minute, even that perceiving of the space itself, it's still an object. So you still have the perceiver perceiving the object. So what do you do next? Okay, so you got a little flashlight, and then you got a big light that's shining through everything, diffusing awareness onto everything in the space around you. Then, yeah, but it's still shining out. It's still shining out. Okay, awareness is still looking out. So you still have subject-object consciousness. So how do you deal with that? Okay, let's investigate the observer. So you flip it backwards, okay, rather than shining the light out to an object in the first four jhanas, and then they diffuse it to everything in the fifth jhana, in the base of infinite space. You are returning it back and looking at the watcher itself. So the flashlight is turning the beam on itself. This is probably the trickiest one to do. It's possible. It can be done. It's not too bad. I think the hardest one is from number 4 to number 5. And so when this happens, suddenly there's a collapse of duality. So everything becomes one. It becomes the watcher. Everything becomes awareness. So I had this experience where I had so much piti, or energetic movement. By this point, if you don't have kundalini or energetic movements, then you're probably not practicing it right. But I had so much energetic movement, I couldn't sleep. So I ended up meditating all night. And the next morning I got up and I got out, washed my face, brushed my teeth, looked in the mirror, and my mind was going, oh my God, you've been possessed. And I thought, what? I'm still here. So whatever, I didn't believe my thought. Next thing I know, there was this energetic movement that went through all my whole body, and I was, kind of like everything just became alive, like all the cells in my body became alive. And I walked into the room and I looked at my partner and I thought, huh, he's me. And then I walked, I looked over as my dog. Oh my God, that's me too. And so I thought, okay. So maybe those two are still, kind of like sentient beings. Let me try something else. So I walk into the washroom. I take the most, mundane, stupid thing, which is the toilet bowl. And look at it, I go, is this me? Look at it, the toilet bowl. And then there was this recognition. That's me too. Okay, so that is the experience of the base of infinite consciousness. The subject-object collapses and everything becomes one. This is where most of the Christian writes about, everything is God. And most of the Hindus writes about all is Brahman, all is Brahma, all is the creator. And this is where people talk about the heavenly realm in the Mahayana Sutra, the Pure Land Sutta, where they talk about the Pure Land. So at that time, I got up and I thought, okay, well, my partner was still sleeping. He got up, he kissed me. I was like, oh, very strange feeling. I was kissing myself. and And then I thought, okay, you go back to sleep. At that point, I was still smoking at that time. So I said, I'm gonna go out, buy a pack of cigarettes. So I walked out to the store, buy a pack of cigarettes. And as I was walking out to the store, everything around me was in a state of deep, deep, peaceful awareness that everything was me. And there's this deep serenity, deep love. You can only describe it as an incredible sense of love, okay, for all things, even the most mundane things. And so this incredible sense of love is pervasive. It's like, it was like recognizing that everything is you. So in this, that's when the subject, object, observer, and the things that are being observed collapses, and it becomes everything is the observer. Okay, I don't know how to describe it, but that's as close as I can describe it. Now, if you go to solitary retreat and experience this state, some weird things happen. You probably sometimes get the precognition. Why? Because your awareness just expanded to be a part of everything. So I think precognition comes with kind of the message. Because the boundaries between your own awareness and and the oneness that is aware of all things, the awareness of all things, becomes blurred, becomes reduced. So most people will experience some sort of, I call it, supernatural gifts when they are at this stage. If they have deep enough jhana practice, especially, I was doing a very intensive jhana practice in my first 13, 14 years of meditation. So when I got to this point, there was a lot of, I call it, weird psychic phenomenon that happened. So it is a natural part of this stage. So don't be alarmed when you get to this stage, and if you successfully remain in this stage. And understand this: the jhana practice is what happens on the cushion, but once you get it, once you're able to enter it properly on the cushion, if you do vipassana off the cushion, which at that time I was really, really heavily involved in the vipassana off the cushion, then a lot of the jhana's effects is going to overlap into your vipassana practice. Okay, so I had experiences of very strange experiences while walking through life while I was practicing this stage. Okay, this is a stage where everybody talks about in the literature, Christian literature, as well as a lot of Buddhist and Hindu literature, is a state of oneness. There's a joke. What do you want with your hot dog? One with everything. So this is the practice of the jhanas to this point. Okay, so when you get to this stage, the next breakthrough is going to the base of infinite nothingness. So understand this: do not identify with any of these stages because they are transitory. Okay, many people get to this stage and they're like, oh, I'm enlightened. I have awakening of all these cities, special latent experiences, or have, interesting experiences. And I would say ignore them all. Why? Because if you don't, you're going down a rabbit hole to nowhere. The practice of Zen is to discard all of this. So after a while, you start to go in and out of this stage often enough. For me, I was able to go in and out of these stage almost constantly in 2007, 2008, almost like hourly. So, and when you're in this stage, at first you're like really enjoying. It's like a sense of freedom. I'm one with everything. Compassion arises. Suddenly you love everybody. You know, and this is where real compassion starts to arise, right? You love everybody. Oh God, you can't help but love everybody because they're all you. is this identification of oneness? You know, everybody's you. Even even Vladimir Putin. Okay, and and so this is where the real compassion arises. Now, if you've been with me for a number of years, you probably clued in that I don't talk about compassion very much. Why? Because I don't care about the concept of compassion. I care about the experience of compassion. This is where you get it, okay? So when you get to this stage, the experience of compassion automatically increases. Okay? Automatically increases. You don't have to do anything. It automatically increases. You can't help yourself to forgive people. You can't help. I mean, at this point, it's very hard to have ill will while you're in this arupa. It's no longer called a jhana. It's called arupa. Okay. So, but you need to go further because you realize it's no longer in duality, but there's one left. The observer. Okay, so it's not nothingness. You got to go further. Okay, this is the really hard part to describe. Well, you shift your attention from observing the observer, and you shift your attention to the nothingness behind it. It's not a space. There's just behind the observer, there is a nothingness. Okay, so you shift your attention to that nothingness. And suddenly, when you shift your attention to that nothingness, everything drops. The observer is gone. So at that point, you don't even have to watch her anymore. There's no feelings, there's no perception. Oh, basically your mind is, you know, it can still conceptualize, but there's, you know, it can't do any thinking. And perception is really subtle. It's like this point of view that happens before you even think. Okay, so it's like this kind of subtle attitude that you see the world with. And so at number 7, the base of infinite nothingness, that falls off. So you got no conceptualizing, no perception, no feeling, no sensory experience. Why is this a nice space? I don't know how to describe it to you. It's just indescribable, but it's very nice to be in. Okay. It's incredibly freeing and nice to be in, even better than the previous one. It is in this space that non-duality completely falls away. Like duality completely falls away. So we have a koan, you know, every time we send an email out, we have a signature in our Sangha's email, and Millen put that in. It says, if everything's one, where does the one go? That's a koan, right? If everything's one, where does the one go? Well, that answers this, okay, this stage of meditative absorption. So it's very hard to describe. I can only help take you there, but I can't really describe to you what's in there. Okay. I can only say what's missing. I can't say what it is. So what's missing is no conceptualization, no perception, no feelings, no sensory. The four of the aggregates are gone. And then we get to even more subtle, the base of neither perception or non-perception. Now, if you got into the base of infinite nothingness, it's not too hard to shift into this. In the base of neither of perception or of neither perception or non-perception, consciousness gets reduced, and it's almost like smaller to the point where it's only a small little thing in your in your noticing. It's like that moment just before you fall asleep, except you're totally aware with clarity. You're not asleep and you're not dull at all. You're still aware, but it's almost like that moment, and you're able to hold that moment. Okay, but you're not asleep. And this very reduced consciousness, it's a very relaxing place to be in. Okay, the one that comes next is harder. Nirodha Samavati is the ninth jhana. That's when the last light blinks out. Consciousness is gone. Now, why do we go into the ninth jhana where our consciousness is gone? Right? Because when your consciousness is gone, you're not unable to perceive anything. Why do we go in there? In the Buddha's original teaching, if a person is able to go in there from 1 day to 7 days, then he has become an arahat. I think there's a Vietnamese monk who went in there for 7 days. He was invited in to go to teach in Australia, and just before the Dharma talk, everybody sat in meditation, and he sat in meditation and he went into number 8. No, number 9. The talk never happened. Basically, he never came out for a couple days later. So I spoke to one of his students, and one of his students told me that, wow, my teacher is so amazing. He can go into meditation for 7 days and not come out. And he can sit in meditation for 7 days. And it seems like a very short time for him. And when he comes out, everybody's so proud, and all the students are trying to mimic, him to see how long they can sit in meditation. But then he said, that person said to me, he says, but I've noticed something when he's not meditating, when he's not in the jhanas, when he's out and about and talking and interacting with the students, and these are monastic students, they're not lay students. If somebody doesn't do things the way he likes, especially one of the students that doesn't make do things the way he likes, he throws a teapot at them. He gets pissed off and throws a teapot at them. So he still has anger. So I saw that person, that monk told me, I realized that going into the ninth jhana doesn't mean anything. When you're out of it, you still got the 3 poison, which is what? Delusion, anger, and greed, right? And desire. So he left that teacher and he went to Burma to study under somebody else. And he's correct in his observation, and he's correct in his decision. Because for the Buddha, being able to enter this jhana is not a badge of honor. Being able to enter this jhana is so that you apply vipassana, okay, when you come out of it. So when you come out of it, when you're in this state, it's almost like dreamless sleep. You're like almost in a coma, and the brain is almost like in a state of dreamless sleep. And they've done, I call it neurological study on this. Somebody did an fMRI on this. So you're in a state of dreamless sleep. The brain is akin to being in the dreamless sleep, like a mild coma. Why do you want to be in a mild coma? Why did the Buddha want you to be in a mild coma where consciousness butts up? Because he wants you to be able to, when you come out of it, observe how the consciousness arises You remember, last week I talked about the 12 dependent origination. Okay, the steps on how consciousness makes up the whole self. Okay, the 5 aggregates makes up the whole self. When you are in Nirodha Samapatti, Nirodha, which is the 9th jhana, there's no consciousness. So when you come out of it, slowly you're gonna see it's like, you know, somebody strikes a spark, awareness comes out of, you know, kind of like wake up again. Awareness wakes up again, and you go from the 9th jhana down to number 1. So you can see all of the, what I call the 5 aggregates starts piling on each other. You see, building on each other. So you're seeing your mind building reality and how it perceives the world step by step. You see that? So it goes from no consciousness to perception. Okay, and it goes from no consciousness to consciousness in the 8th and the 7th jhana, and then it goes from just consciousness to perception in the base of infinite consciousness and the base of infinite space, and then, you know, gradually it's adding on more of the aggregates as you go down. You notice that? That's why I have this chart. Okay. And so you're seeing the whole process, how your mind creates reality, how your mind perceives the whole world. So when I talked about learning, you know, the Buddha's, this Buddhist school of Yogacara, which is Buddhist school of phenomenology of mind, basically the school that studies Buddhist psychology. This is what they study. This is what they hone in. Okay. When they say Yogacara means mind only. And when they say mind only, they don't mean that there's no external existence of things. They're not saying things outside of the mind, outside of you, doesn't exist. They're saying you're not able to really perceive what's out there because everything that you perceive is seen through mind. Everything that you perceive is seen through this process that the Buddha has discovered. Okay, so it's one thing to learn psychology and say, everything you perceive is through this. It's another thing to experiencing firsthand, slowing down this process, seeing it in your own mind. Okay, and if you experience this, when you get to the 9th stage and then you come out and you start to see consciousness kicks in and everything slowly kicks in as you go down the jhanas, this is an aha moment. It's like, oh my God. I'm living in this reality that's completely generated by the delusions of my own mind. Okay, so that's the Vipassana part. That's the observational part. Okay, the impartial observation of one's own mind. And when you are able to impartially observe these things, you have this insight. The insight is not from an intellectual learning. The insight is from direct experience. And it's only from direct experience insight that will liberate you. It's like you have this aha moment. Aha! Oh my God! What I call me, myself, and I is constructed by this whole process. So the self is a whole process. The self is a process. Okay, and it doesn't exist. Because it doesn't exist normal, you know, it's uniformly as a self, it exists as a combination of all these things. So it's one thing to talk about it conceptually, is another thing altogether to experience it directly. And this is what the Buddha experienced, and that's on the night of his awakening, that's what he's experienced. Okay. And so we're talking about the jhanas. The jhanas, it means sitting on the cushion. You're sitting on the cushion. Okay. everything that I talk about, all these experience is on the cushion, is when you're sitting. When it's off the cushion, and you experience the 7 factors of the 7th jhana, okay, which is the cessation of perception. In Buddhism, it's called cessation. Basically, it's nirvana, off the cushion. If you are experiencing the cessation of perception. So you only have consciousness left. You're still walking, talking, doing everything, but there's no filter of perception. There's no filter of thoughts. There's no filters of feeling. There's no filter of sensation. There's only consciousness. Whoever can show has got a brief experience of that. Not the first time you can show, probably the second or the third time when you work on your koan. When you walk around and things are so clear, it's unbelievably clear. It's like night and day clear. It's like the world that you knew before was like a black and white or fuzzy TV in the 70s. And what you see now, after you can show, and in that moment that you can show, that you wake up, it's like Blu-ray. Okay, it's that's how I compare it. Okay, and this Blu-ray moment is actually, it's there because the first 4 aggregates have ceased to be. It's not filtering your mind. So it still functions, but it's not filtering consciousness. And in Buddhism, we call that cessation. Okay, the stopping. Full cessation on the cushion is the 9th jhana. But cessation off the cushion is the absence of duality. So things are seen as they are without mental filters. Okay? Make this very clear. A lot of people get confused with this. I think one of the reasons why people get confused with this is because most practitioners don't get this far. And the higher you go on this practice, the less people you're going to find, like, you know, who knows what these things are. I have talked to many people, like skilled meditators, in my travel in Vietnam in 2014 and 15 and 16, and you know, skilled meditators in North America as well. Very few people get here. I can name a handful, not even on my hand, that I have come across. So this is where people, I mean, I think this is where the shit really hits the fan. It's the end of suffering. This is the actual end of suffering, right? And unfortunately, very few people know it. Okay, so when you look at Vipassana is nothing but the impartial observation of what's going on. So when you get into the jhanas, you get whatever stage you're in, observe what is there and what is not there. And when you get out of the jhanas, take down notes of that observation. That's a Vipassana. Taking the notes is called a recollection practice. Before, when the Buddha taught it, you know, his monks didn't know how to write, or they didn't have paper to take down notes. The Buddha just notice it after you get out of the meditation. He calls it recollection practice. I think it's more helpful now if you do it manually. And I've been doing it manually for 30 years, writing down my observations of the jhanas. And so when you're in the jhanas, you're able to observe what is there, what is not there, what is present and what is not present. Okay, so I know that the handout that I gave you, the original practice of mindfulness and insights, by Kuladasa, he's actually he was actually a professor of psychology at UBC or Calgary or something like that. Anyway, he had a long career of teaching psychology, and also a Buddhist practice. He studied with some very dedicated practitioner. And when he retired, he taught Buddhism full time before he passed away. And I think he has probably the best summary of the Jhanas and Vipassana practice that I've seen so far. So that's why I've used that handout. I know it's pretty thick, but it's considered light for academia. So this is light for me. Whatever you need to ask. Okay, if you're stuck. So, what is cessation? Cessation is the destructions of the taint, what is called asava, 3 karmic propensities. 1, karmic propensities for sensual desire. 2, the karmic propensity for existence. And when we mean existence, what do we mean? Identifying with me, myself, and I. Okay, so there's this reflexive mechanism that has everything you see in subject-object consciousness. It's me, right? The car is mine. the report that I just wrote is mine. If somebody criticizes, I get mad. That's the propensity for existence. That's existence. Okay, so everywhere you look, everywhere you experience, it's mine. It's me. So the mind automatically does that without actually involving you. That's a karmic propensity. So after Kensho, you basically get into the jhanas deeper and deeper and deeper, and you're starting to see like the filters of these karmic propensities starts to drop. And when it drops, you're going to notice the difference. Okay? The way that you navigate life, the way that you experience life, everyday life is going to be different. Difference in terms of what? I can only tell you the difference is you're suffering a lot less. Those 5 hindrances is not going to happen. It still happens, but the intensity of it is going to drop away, or the duration of it was going to drop away. So what I would say is, the first time you wake up, it's like, oh my God, my whole life I'm sleeping. And then you go right back to sleep. And then the next time you wake up, it's like, oh, I just sleep for 2 weeks. That's what a calm practice is, keeps getting you waking up, right? And you look, oh my God, I just went back to sleep. This is what waking up is like. Oh, great. And then you go right back to sleep. And then maybe, hopefully, you keep your calm practice and your meditation practice, ramped up. And then the next week you wake up again and you go, oh, okay. That was 7 days. So you start kind of bringing these awakening moments closer and closer and closer and closer together. Okay, until the awakening can be almost like a day. You can have a full day of awakening, or many days. Okay. And so when you're awake, when you're going to cessation, I call it Wu Wei, because Wu Wei is a better term. I like it better. It's a Taoist term. It's kind of cool. The karmic propensity for ignorance. That's when ignorance ends. There's an incredible clarity that comes with it. And there's a quality of effortless action. So you do things without actually having to effort to do anything. You do things without having any desire whatsoever to do it. You do things without having any intention to even do it. It just happens by itself. It's very hard to describe. That's why it's called non-doing. That's what Wu Wei means, non-doing. Okay. So how do you get to this? What the Buddha taught in his 45 years of teachings are summarized into the system. Suffering, the causes of suffering, which is the 12-link chain that we talked about, the 5 aggregates, 10 fetters. We'll talk about the fetters afterwards. The hindrances, the 5 hindrances and 3 poison. 3 poison is desire, aversion, and ignorance, and non-clarity. And the end of suffering by the realizing of nibbana, or the cessation of suffering. What is the cessation of suffering? What I just described. The destructions of 3 karmic propensity for sensual desire, karmic propensity for existence, karmic propensity for ignorance. And so the way to end suffering was through that 37 factors of enlightenment and the 3-pronged practice: precepts, jhana, vipassana, and the 3 refuge: the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha. 37 factors in enlightenment is 7 different ways. There are 7 different ways of approaching enlightenment. Anyway, you can apply all these factors in however way you want. You can mix and match them, whatever. But that summarized the Buddha's teachings for his 45 years of teaching. And it's not optional. The precepts, the jhanas, and the vipassana is not optional. The 3 refuge is not optional. Okay. 37 factors of enlightenment. Some of it's optional, some of it's not. Depends on which path you pick, because there's 7 of them. Okay, but the 3-pronged practice, 3 refuge is not optional. So what I was taught first learning the Theravada practice is there's probably 40, 50 different meditation methods in Theravada Buddhism, in the original teachings of the Buddha. And it depends on the person in front of him, whatever that person's ailment is that he prescribes the practice. So it's like a doctor with medicine, right? And he prescribes it differently for each person. So when we talk about, I'm doing this method, and I'm doing this school, and I'm doing that school, and I'm like, it's kind of useless to talk like that, because the Buddha never approach with the system first and the people later. He approached with the people, and then I'll give them what they need, right? So in modern Buddhism, where everybody's dividing things to this school and that school, and all this method and that method, my way of looking at it is what works for that person. Okay, which is exactly what the Buddha looks at. So in the teachings of the Buddha, he uses 4 main methods of observation of the mind. This is a vipassana practice that helps to cure, I call it cure, the ailments of the 5 hindrances. The first one is observation of the breath by counting the breath, which is what we do. So you can see our Zen practice is not coming out of nowhere. Okay, this is right out of the earliest text. So counting the breath and observation of the breath is a way to reduce mind wandering and develop concentration when the mind is too distracted. So it counters the mental tendencies to be distracted, worrisome, agitated, or dull, increase the ability to hold attention, and increase calmness. The next meditation is metta meditation, or loving kindness meditation. This is for people who have a lot of hatred and anger in them. Okay, most of you don't have that problem. I had a student who was a psychopath. I was teaching him to do this. Why? Because psychopathy by its nature is brought on by trauma. So they have a lot of dull, it's brought on by trauma, and a lot of them have blunted emotions. And loving kindness meditation actually increases the emotionality, positive emotionality. So it increases feeling of joy and sympathy towards other people, increasing a person's empathy and generosity tendencies. So it encounters anger and ill will. So if somebody who has a lot of anger, a lot of hatred, perceives the world negatively, this is the meditation for them that the Buddha taught. Observation of dependent origination arising. This meditation helps to counter the tendency for people who have very fixed views and self-centered tendency, which is probably all of us. um, this is the observations that we actually do through the Zen practice, going through the jhanas and observing, right? Or we do through the koan practice and just whoosh right past the jhana. Okay, that's what the koan practice is. It's a high-speed train past, just whip right past a lot of the jhanas. And so when you get into that seventh stage and get again, it's a cessation outside of meditation, sitting meditation, it triggers into insight of the mind. And when you first got insight into the mind, it's very disturbing because you realize, oh my God, I'm making all of this up. My mind's making all of this up. You're gonna get very disturbed because what you realize is that other people is not the problem. I am the problem, right? And for some people, it's very disturbing because we like to think I'm the one. I'm the center of the world. I'm the good one. I'm the protagonist of my story. And suddenly, all your story disappears, and you realize you made up the story. Okay, and so the insight into the nature of mind and reality that comes with Kensho, it can be very disturbing. And if you come through the gradual steps to get to this insight, it's very disturbing as well. So people are going to have an experience of being very disturbed for a while with this realization. It's unsettling because suddenly the rug underneath your experience, your whole foundation of experiencing everything just got pulled. It got yanked. Okay. The next observation of death and decaying. I love this one. I know it's weird that I love this one, but the truth is, I have a lot of, I call it close encounter with death because I was asthmatic as a kid. I didn't have any medicine while being asthmatic. So every time I have an asthma attack, it could be my last one. I had to sit there and just wait it out. So for me, it brought me face to face with the realization of death. More so ever, you know, when you look at death and you look at, you know, especially the Buddha kind of asked the students to go into observe a real decaying body over a period of number of days. It got a trigger feeling of disgust, right? And then you realize that everything that you have been attracted to your whole life, you know, beautiful women, beautiful men, beautiful things you adorn yourself with, it comes to nothing because this body is very temporary. So the observation of death and decaying can cause a lot of disgust. But the problem is this disgust is not for you to reject the body. This disgust is for you to reject the desire associated with the body. I see it as for what it is. It's not to create negative, you know, things. But in some ways, now I know cognitive behavioral therapy. This is the Buddha's, I call it behavioral therapy. Probably the earliest form of behavioral therapy to train you to, you know, kind of be disgusted with the adornment of the body and be attached to it, because our human beings, you know, that we are very attached to the body. We are very, very attached to the body, and the self is very attached to the body. So this observation, I do this observation quite often, and I find that it's very free, because if you realize that every moment you can die, wow, you're really enjoying life. Right? You don't take life for granted anymore. Every moment is precious. So the fifth one is the observation of changing mental states. Now, if your jhanas and your meditation gets deep enough, when you get out of it and you keep observing your mind, you're going to notice throughout your day, going through your day, you're going through so many different mental states, right? So many different moods. And we're not talking about you being dysfunctional or anything. This is just normal, just a normal functional human being going through so many different moods, so many mental states of mind. And they're all temporary, including the one on the jhanas, the really beautiful jhanic states. They're temporary as well. So when you notice the temporariness of all these mental states, you start to not be attached to them. So when they arise, you go, I like Saskatchewan weather, wait 5 minutes. I'll be gone. So you don't get disturbed when they arise, right? And you don't cling on to them when they go away. Okay? So what's the point of observing the 5 changing mental states? So you're no longer attached to any of them. And that's the real freedom. So when somebody asked me one time, one of my students asked me, so how often do you go into cessation? And I said, here and there, randomly. I'm not attached to it. That is the most important thing. Even you cannot be attached to cessation itself. Of course, no. I'm not telling you to do that right now. I'm telling you to do that at the last minute. Okay? At the last minute. Because there's a tendency for meditators to be attached to all these meditation states, including the cessation, the experience of cessation. That's why Zen emphasizes on what? Ordinary being ordinary. Being ordinary means you experience everything, but nothing sticks, including cessation. And that's the real freedom. Okay? Okay, so without the 5 precepts, I can guarantee you, if you're not observing the 5 precepts, you will not be able to get through the hindrances, and you won't even get to the first jhana. And I've seen people do this. They practice meditation for 20 years, and they don't observe the precepts. They don't even know what the first jhana looks like. Okay? So I can't stress enough, you got to observe the precepts when you're off the cushion. Because the precepts is what keeps you from all these 5 hindrances arising when you're on the cushion. Any questions? Open up for discussions. I know it's pretty thick and heavy, today's lesson. Okay, so come on. Don't be shy. I'm gonna unmute everybody here so it makes you talk.
I have a question, Harriet.
Yes.
So the way we talk about the jhanas is, kind of in a consecutive manner, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. Sometimes I find that I don't always move through, and maybe it's just not accurate enough observation, but in the working on the jhana states that I'm working on right now, I don't necessarily find, like, for example, I seem to go from the 4th to the 6th a little bit, but I don't feel like I have that much time in the 5th. Is that or sometimes even with a cone, maybe the 4th, and then not right. So like
I'm gonna distinguish between the light jhanas and the deep jhanas.
Okay, thank you.
The light jhanas is when you're in it, you get distracted. You don't stay in it too very often. You don't stay in it too long, and you can't sustain it as long. Basically, 5-10 minutes is the maximum you can do.
So when you say that, you mean it's like more talking about, like, I think of it like, you think of like the jhanas like almost like a horizontal way, and then the light and dark, there's like a depth way. Is that what you mean?
Yes,
okay.
Yes. Okay. There's 2 types of jhanas that people talk about. There's the sutra jhanas, and this is why I asked you to read this text, because there's no divide between the sutra jhanas and the commentary jhanas. They're both jhanas. They're just on a spectrum of how deep it is. Okay. People are generally doing the light jhanas. Why? Because when they're doing the light jhanas, they're getting into the light jhanas, it's possible, but they haven't purified their whole body. Purification is really important. How the purification happens is through vipassana. It's not through jhanas, it's through vipassana. Okay.
The observation.
Right. Okay. It's when you gain those insights that you start to cut away all the attachments. That's purification.
Like when you start taking your notes better and you start being more precise and you start thinking, when I'm in the 6, this is what it feels like. This is what it looks like. This is my sign markers.
No. Is your attachment to life. Is your attachment to life in general. First of all, my fears of the unknown. My relationship with other people. How I see them as objects of my mind. Okay? Those are attachments. Those are attachment to life. All these perceptions that you have, those things are attachment to life. You're not attaching to anybody. It's just your mind making up stuff and then you're holding on to it. Okay? And you're suffering with it. Those things are attachments. And when I talk about purification, I'm not talking about going into deep jhana states, because you're not going to purify there. You're going to purify outside of the jhanas when you're observing your everyday life and able to let go of the things that you get attached to. Okay, the reason why you can't get into deep jhanas is because you have fear, you've got doubt, you got hesitation, and you've got all kinds of, I call it, what do you call it? Internal beliefs that you're holding as tension in your body. So, if you have this experience where you're waking up to the realization, oh my God, I'm going through life with this filter, and this filter is, I don't believe anybody because I've been abused, or I'm unworthy, or, it's going to come up. All of these things will come up. And if you don't let go of those filters, you don't transform these filters, you're going to see life through them. And that's what I meant by purification. Okay, it's the insight that purifies, not the jhanas. Okay, so don't be technical and try to go into the jhanas. The jhana is a warm-up exercise for the insight practice. Okay, the jhanas is a warm-up exercise for the insight practice, for the observation practice, to let go of all your mental clinging to life, because that's the real part that's causing suffering. So if you have a realization, oh my God, I made all of this up, then that's an insight, okay? It's like the realization that, oh my God, my husband is not a husband. He's him. Because when I attach the label husband, I got this expectation that follows with the label husband, he's supposed to do this for me, he's supposed to do that for me, he's supposed to love me this way, blah, 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 blah. Okay? And the insight of removing that perception, removing that attachment outside of meditation is the purification. So if you're not getting insights while you're doing the jhanas, that's because you're too busy doing the warm-up and not enough observing of your own life. Remember that the jhanas are a warm-up exercise. They're on the cushion. The real practice is off the cushion.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
Yes, I have a question, but I don't know how to formulate that.
Just try.
So actually in my life, I'm experienced more like of the cushion realization.
Yeah.
Like I have all bunch of all those things like, oh my God, like, but I am kind of see them post happening. I am not seeing them arising, like, like but I am kind in the action already, like inside of that process. And
Yeah,
I just,
it's when the process starts that you're able to see it.
yeah. And I just cannot, I have kind of hope that maybe if I can see like arising that process, I can kind of like do something.
That's a desire in itself.
Yes, exactly. But I was thinking, but now, like if I know how to go into these jhanas, so maybe that would be some kind of help. Like, is it any what I'm
the jhana help the jhana helps the jhana helps the insight helps the jhanas. They're kind of two-way streets. Mm-hmm. So you got the insight, but then you couldn't do anything about it because you don't have enough jhana.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So that's why I tell you to practice more jhana, because you got to balance the two. If you do too much jhana and no vipassana, no observation off the cushion, to observing your own mind off the cushion to get an insight, then you're you're not balanced in your progression.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. And the fundamental basis of that is the precept. So when people say, crazy wisdom, I don't need the precepts, I can do whatever I want. Bullshit. If whoever tells me that, I will kick them. Okay, that's just an excuse to misbehave.
Can I ask a question, please?
Sure.
Yeah, this is more just like, I think, a technical question from the kind of longer reading, the 25-page one. Mm-hmm. When that author is kind of describing sort of like ultralight, light, and deep jhanas.
Yeah, he's very precise.
Yes, and the part that I'm a little bit confused about is that they say that like those I don't know, like descriptions, I guess, correspond to different stages belonging to the 10 stages of samatha vipassana. Is like, what is samatha vipassana? What are those stages? Like, is that the same as the chain of enlightenment arising, or that's like, this is like a different 10 things?
No. It's categorized like, it's like, you know what? If I was to drive to Regina, right? I would describe the drive from near me to go to Regina. I would describe differently than the next person who's driving to the Regina, or somebody who takes a plane to Regina, or somebody who takes a train to Regina. So there's 10 stages of Vipassana practice that is described in the Theravada practice. And I'll cover that next week, by the way.
Okay.
So today we're covering the jhanas, okay? And next week we're going to cover the Vipassana, okay? So it 2,500 years. People want to come up with their own categorization all the time. Okay, what I prefer to do is stick to the Buddha's categorization, because that's original. I mean, you can come up with your own categorization, but my question is, when you're trying to come up with your own system, is that your ego wanting recognition? Okay, so I prefer to use the Buddha's original teachings. Okay, not unless through the cone system is something that's completely different. Like the cone system is like high-speed train, okay, to enlightenment, which is something completely different. It's not gradual, it's not progressive like this. Okay, if somebody's coming up with different stages, it's all arbitrary. Why don't you just use what's there first? Right? There's a tendency for many Westerners, as well as people in the past, to come up with so many different stages, and all these different schools coming up with so many different stages of enlightenment. And I just look at that and I go, there's no point learning everybody else's arbitrary, you know, kind of description of how to get to Regina. Just use the Buddhas. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a guy, what's his name? Daniel Ingram. He calls himself an Arahat, and he claims enlightenment. And I thought, okay, first of all, nobody claims I'm enlightened. not in Buddhist circles anyway. Why don't we claim I'm enlightened? Because if you are really enlightened, you don't really care about the damn batch. Okay. And number two, he's completely obsessed with maps of enlightenment. So he has a book that he writes about all these different maps, and I'm thinking, if you have 10 people driving to Regina, they're going to describe it 10 different ways, right? And on top of that, you're going to have people taking the train or the plane, right? Even taking the plane, you can go through Calgary and not a direct flight, right? So I mean, just use one map. I mean, and as a signpost, as a guide, and if I mean, the Buddha spent 45 years describing it, so his teachings is pretty clear. So I mean, you can pick up whatever map you want to use, but I find that, forget about the maps. I mean, you look at the Zen map, there's no map, right? The ox herding pictures, it's like, there's no map. It's just a bunch of pictures. That is a rebellion against the tendency to conceptualize everything and make a map of everything. That's why Zen comes up with a whole bunch of pictures, right? It's basically kicking conceptualizations and map and academia in the butt, and say, just practice, you people, right? So I'm not obsessed with maps. I'm obsessed with the real experience. If you can call it an obsession. So, I mean, I've read all the maps. I've done many years of reading. I've read thousands of Buddhist books, and I don't see the usefulness of being fixated on maps. And when you're fixated on maps and you go, oh, I might be there. Well, usually you're not, because your ego wants to claim the territory. Okay, just practice. And the best pointer is the end of suffering. See how often your three poison arises. Okay? If your three poison continues to arise every day, like sunshine, then you're not there. Okay? Does that make sense? But if you're getting more and more experience of flow, you're getting more experience of effortlessness moving through your day, you're getting more experience of, non-duality throughout your day. Well, I would say that's real progress. That's the real practice. Okay? And if sometimes you laugh, you cry, no problem. That's the human condition, as long as you're not attached to that. It's the reflexive stuff, If you cry and you go, oh my God, poor me. What if everybody looks at me pathetically? That's the ego. That's the reflective stuff. That is the part that is, I call ignorance, non-clarity part. I had a student who was a psychopath, and we had a lot of discussions about this. His mind just works a little bit different. And he says, maybe the Buddha's teachings, their nirvana thing is very close to psychopathy. And I said, no. No, it's not. I said, no, it's not. The difference why it's not close to psychopathy is we actually have the full spectrum of experience. Basically, I laugh, I cry, I have all of these emotions. None of them sticks. None of them sticks. Okay? That is the difference. And I'm not identifying with these emotions. That is the difference. Whereas psychopathy, they have blunted emotions. They do not feel the depth of emotions. So, it's interesting. My 12 years of teaching Zen come across everybody. I didn't, needless to say, I didn't teach him for too long. it was kind of hair raising to be around a factor 1 psychopath. Not that I discriminate, but I don't think I know how to cure him. Other than teaching him mindfulness, loving kindness meditation, which is what the Buddha prescribes for his condition. But yeah. But no, we do not see people as objects. we see people, enlightened people see everybody as themselves. So you're incapable of hurting anybody else because you do not see people as objects. It's the opposite. You see everybody as you. So you can't help it being compassionate. Okay.
Actually, I was at some point to ask you about war in Ukraine. And it came to my mind today when about expanding awareness for the street, for the country, for like we are on the phone and we are just, in touch with those collective fear, the closer the border, when you just really like notice what's going on, like I had this perception of feeling maybe too much, this is one of my hindrance, but but word, it's like it contains everything. It contains like massive kind of emotions, like massive kinds of things going on, like people are dying, people are
Buddha nature does not discriminate the good and the bad. It contains everything. It has space for the good and the bad. It has space for, people like Putin and Trump. It has space for murderers and psychopaths. It has space for everybody. And I can tell you, in my experience in my life, I had 2 confessions of murder. And when that person, those 2 people confessed to me, I have nothing but compassion for them, and it's kind of weird to say that, but the truth is it creates a lot of suffering. Their action creates suffering on other people, but it also creates an immense amount of suffering on themselves. And so I have compassion for that. And at that one point I discussed with another Buddhist priest, I think, and he says, you didn't call the police? I'm like, first of all, I was not in a situation to call the police because it was not something that was, happened recently. Secondly, I don't have enough information to call the police, like where did it took place, what happened, who it happened to. I didn't have the information to call the police. Thirdly, it was more important that the person opened up to me and told me something that was really awful that it's been carrying for the whole life, and that they've been suffering with it immensely. And so, I mean, I have a lot of compassion for that. I mean, it's for that moment, that very moment that person confessed murder to me, I accepted. I said, accept whatever he was saying, totally, wholly. And what I found is that until people can overcome their demons by bringing it out to the light and make these confessions, that they're able to start looking at it and dealing with it. So who am I to make a judgment? Who am I to stop a person's transformation? You got to reserve judgment and accept people as they are. And so in Buddha nature, there's space for everything and everyone. Strangely, it was kind of scary because the first confession happened when I was like in my early 20s. So didn't know why at that point I was not scared of that person. I mean, maybe they would kill me, but I don't think at that moment that person was had any ill will whatsoever. So.
To follow up on what Eva was saying, though, like, I mean, so we can look at sort of the carnage in the Ukraine with equanimity rather than, like, I think of it and I have this like horrible aversion to what's happening. Like, it's awful. Like,
You can look at the whatever's happening in Ukraine, we can look at it with equanimity, because nobody goes and causes suffering onto other people because they're so happy. Okay, people cause suffering because they're suffering themselves. And so that's why I tell a lot of my students, I said the best thing you could do for the world is to end your own suffering, so you don't go around causing suffering to people around you and to the world around you. So what is happening in Ukraine is a result of non-clarity, is a result of ignorance, of the result of not seeing things as they are, and is a result of immense suffering by one individual, you know, or a bunch of individuals with power that is causing suffering on everybody else. So until we stop this cycle within ourselves, each and every person that we are takes responsibility for our own suffering and our own liberation. Until we're able to do that, the world is not going to end to have the ending of suffering. And unfortunately, in order for people to wake up to the realization that they're suffering, there has to be immense suffering in order for them to wake up. You know, just your run-of-the-mill suffering in everyday life doesn't help people wake up. So I say, you know, the horrible causes of the Holocaust has propelled the children of the Holocaust, you know, children of those who experienced the Holocaust, to go to Asia and bring Buddhism back to the West. And all of the movement was done by the Jewish community, people from the Jewish community. So they call them Bujus. So Jack Kornfield, Sharon Salzberg, you know, all of those people, all of the people who brought Buddhism to the West and is fantastic at doing it in the last 40, 50 years, were all from Jewish families who experienced terrible, terrible suffering from the Holocaust. Okay. So my name is Lotus, that my teacher gave it to me. It's from immense suffering that you know, that's where the mud, the mud of samsara, that's where awakening arises. That's where liberation comes. So, you know, don't reject one and you know, propel, you know, kind of desire the other. They're both the same, those are sides of the same coin. Megan, any idea? You can tell her about how suffering propels awakening.
I mean, we don't need to go into too deep into that, but yes, immense suffering propelled my awakening.
Yeah.
I lived a nightmare for a whole year. It was absolute hell on earth. It was really bad. It's awful. But it's also like the best thing that's ever happened to me, which is like the, you know, and that's like the two sides of the same thing, is that it was incredibly painful. But yeah, like from all of that darkness has come like so much lightness. And
you went through trial by fire, you know, a crazy purification process in a very small span of a year. Usually people stretch that out to a couple of years. You went through a year of hell. Yeah. But I said the purification is not fun, but it is at the same time the worst and the best thing that happens to you.
Yeah. Easier to say that now. I can tell you that. You know, like when I'm seeing more of like I don't want to call it the upside, but like just the other side of it, it's a lot easier to say that now. It wasn't easy to say that when I was living it, right? Like every day, every moment. It was really hard.
But it really forces you to be on the straight and narrow of the practice. You couldn't waver. Every time you waver, it meant suffering, so you couldn't waver. You got no choice. Like I said, usually people have that kind of, spread out over a few years, but you got it like crazily hit you in 1 year. So, like I said, it's from the mud that you get the flowers. Don't see them as a negative and positive. They both work in conjunction with each other. Human beings are crazy anyway. If we don't make war, we're gonna do something else that's crazy. But I don't think in our whole history we have been without war. So, any other questions? John, do you have any questions? Okay, we end the class for tonight. The Kensho groupies stay behind for a little bit. Thank you. And if you just keep doing the reading, if you have questions from the reading, come back next week and ask them. Just keep doing this reading. I mean, the reading, the assigned reading, and the optional reading. They're pretty good.
Oh, sorry, Lotus, that just technical question. Last recording, was it like post somewhere for the last meeting, or because you record those sessions, yes, for our class? Do you record?
Yeah.
Okay, so the last recording, was it like sent?
Marie, could you give her the link? I think we still have it on. I can't hear you. You're muted.
Sorry, I never got the link from the last class.
Okay, I'll send you the link. But from my understanding, it only lasts for like 14 days, so you got 7 days left.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I never got it, so I don't know.
I'll try to download it and see if I can upload it with YouTube. But I think just listen to it right away, because I don't know. I don't know if I have time to upload it to YouTube, but yeah, I'll share the link on the groupies.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
So Lotus, we're for this advanced class, we're following Toronto time, so we're still next week. We're